Daniel and Maria had been married for 10 years when they finally bought their dream home. For years, they had lived in small apartments, saving carefully for the right place. When they found the quiet neighborhood on Maple Street, it felt perfect. The houses were painted in soft colors, children played on the sidewalks, and the sound of birds filled the air in the mornings. Daniel loved the wide porch, while Maria loved the garden space in the backyard. The day they moved in, neighbors waved from across the street, smiling warmly. But there was one person who did not smile. A tall man with a stiff walk and dark sunglasses stood near the entrance of the neighborhood. He wore a vest with HOA security stitched across the front. He held a clipboard as if it were a badge of power. His name, he said, was Mr. Clark. Daniel had shaken his hand politely. "Nice to meet you," he said, but the man's grip was cold. Clark only nodded, scanning the moving truck as if he were inspecting it. Maria noticed the way he carried himself. He walked as if he wanted people to believe he was in charge, even though he was not wearing any real uniform. She smiled politely but said nothing. That night, when Daniel and Maria sat on their porch, Daniel laughed about their new HOA officer. "He takes his job too seriously," Daniel said, sipping his tea. Maria smiled. "Some people like to show power where there is none. Don't let it bother you." Maria was calm, graceful, and always carried herself with quiet strength. Daniel knew she had a strong past, but he never questioned too much. She was private about certain parts of her life, and he respected that. The next morning, Daniel left early for work, while Maria stayed home to unpack boxes. Around mid-morning, she heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, there stood Mr. Clark, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his tone firm. "I'm here on behalf of the HOA. There are a few rules you'll need to follow. No garden decorations in the front yard, no parking on the curb, and no outdoor lights after 10 p.m. I'll be watching." Maria looked at him kindly. "Thank you for telling me. We'll be careful." Clark narrowed his eyes, as if he expected resistance. When Maria gave none, he frowned, almost disappointed. He wanted to see fear or frustration, but instead he saw calmness. As days passed, Maria noticed that Clark was always around. He stood at corners, pretending to write notes on his clipboard. Sometimes, she saw him peeking into yards, inspecting cars, and even questioning delivery drivers. Some neighbors ignored him, others avoided him, but nobody challenged him. One evening, while Daniel watered the plants, Clark walked up again. "Your trash bins were half an inch away from the curb line," Clark said sharply. "That's a violation." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Half an inch?" He looked at Maria, almost ready to laugh. But she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "We'll fix it," she said softly. Clark gave a stiff nod and walked away. Daniel sighed once he was gone. "This man is unbelievable. Who gave him authority?" "Authority is only as real as people believe it to be," Maria replied. Her words stayed with Daniel. He wondered how his wife always remained so calm, even when someone tried to act controlling. She never argued, never raised her voice, but there was something in her presence that felt unshakable. Later that week, while Daniel worked late, Maria sat on the porch with a book. Clark stopped by once again. "You've been leaving your porch light on past 10, he said. "That's against neighborhood rules." Maria looked up from her book and smiled gently. "The light helps me read. But thank you for reminding me. I'll turn it off soon." Clark's jaw tightened. It was as if her calmness unsettled him. He was used to people fearing him, but Maria showed no fear. She treated him as if he were only a neighbor, not an officer. That night, Daniel came home and found Maria quiet, thoughtful. "He came again, didn't he?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "Yes, but it's fine. People like him are testing. They want reaction. But if we don't react, they lose power." Daniel stared at her. "Sometimes I feel like you know more about these things than you let on." Maria only smiled. "Maybe I do." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. He often wondered how Maria carried so much wisdom and calmness. He never knew the full story of her past, but he trusted her. Still, in the back of his mind, a thought lingered. Why did she never show fear? Why did she handle every situation like someone who had seen much more in life? As the days turned into weeks, the neighborhood grew used to Clark's presence, though many whispered complaints. Children avoided him, parents muttered behind closed doors, but no one stood up to him. Except Maria, though she never raised her voice, her quiet courage stood out. What no one in the neighborhood knew was that Maria carried a secret, a truth that could change the way everyone saw her. But for now, she kept it hidden. For her, peace mattered more than pride. And though Daniel didn't yet realize it, the calm strength of his wife would soon be tested in ways neither of them expected. The weeks passed quickly on Maple Street, and Daniel and Maria began to settle into their new home. They painted the living room a warm beige, planted flowers in the backyard, and finally unpacked the last of their moving boxes. Life was slowly becoming peaceful, at least inside their little house. But outside, the presence of Mr. Clark was hard to ignore. Almost every day, he found a reason to stop by. Sometimes it was about the lawn being too long, even though Daniel had just trimmed it. Other times, it was about the garden hose being left out or the curtains not being drawn in the evening. His voice always carried authority, as if he were giving orders. Daniel grew frustrated. "He acts like this whole neighborhood belongs to him," Daniel muttered one evening, pacing the living room. "Why doesn't anyone tell him to stop?" Maria, who was folding laundry, glanced at him calmly. "Because people are afraid. They think he has power. Fear makes people silent." Daniel sighed. "Well, I'm not afraid. Next time he comes, I'll..." Maria interrupted softly, placing a hand on his arm. "No. Don't let anger control you. Let's observe first. Sometimes, the best way to see truth is to stay quiet." Daniel shook his head, but he respected her words. She had a way of making him pause, even when he was upset. That weekend, they attended a neighborhood gathering at the park. Families brought food, children played, and laughter filled the air. For a while, it felt like a true community. But then, as always, Clark appeared. He walked through the park, scanning everything as if he were on patrol. A group of neighbors whispered near the picnic tables. "He was yelling at me yesterday because my car was parked a little close to the curb," one man said. "He threatened to fine me for leaving my kids' bikes outside," another woman added. "But is he even allowed to do that?" someone asked. Nobody knew for sure. Daniel overheard their conversation and leaned closer. "He tried the same with us," he said. "Half an inch of trash bin space, can you believe that?" The group laughed softly, but their eyes darted toward Clark, who stood a few feet away, writing in his clipboard. It was clear that everyone disliked his behavior, yet no one dared to confront him. Maria joined the circle quietly, listening more than speaking. She noticed the way people lowered their voices, as if they were afraid Clark might hear. She also noticed Clark's eyes behind his sunglasses. He wasn't really watching children play or people eat, he was watching faces, studying reactions. When the gathering ended, Daniel and Maria walked home together. "It's strange," Daniel said. "He's just a man with a clipboard, but everyone treats him like a police officer." Maria nodded. "That's the danger of pretending. If enough people believe the act, it becomes reality." The next morning, Daniel left early for work again. Around 10, Maria stepped outside to water the flowers. As the cool water sprinkled over the soil, she heard footsteps. She turned and saw Clark approaching. "Morning," he said sharply. "I noticed your car was parked too close to the fire hydrant last night. That's not acceptable." Maria looked at him politely. "The car was in the driveway. Perhaps you saw another vehicle." Clark frowned, flipping through his clipboard. "No, I saw it." "Don't argue with me. If it happens again, there will be consequences." Maria set the watering can down gently. "I don't argue," she said with a calm smile. "I listen. But I also remember the truth." Her words seemed to unsettle him. He shifted uncomfortably, tapping his pen against the clipboard. For a moment, he opened his mouth as if to speak again, but then closed it and walked away. When Daniel came home later, Maria told him about the exchange. Daniel grew angry. "He can't keep making things up. This is harassment." Maria shook her head. "It's a test. He wants a reaction. If we give him one, he wins." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. "How can you stay so calm?" he asked suddenly. Maria, who was reading beside him, looked up. "Because calmness is stronger than anger. Anger burns quickly and fades. Calmness lasts." Daniel turned to face her. "Sometimes I feel like you've been through much harder things than this. You never seem shaken." Maria only smiled gently. "Maybe one day, I'll tell you." The next few days grew even stranger. Clark began to target Maria more directly. If she left the porch light on, he wrote a note. If she let the mail pile up for a day, he appeared at her door. Once, when Daniel was at work, Clark stopped her while she was walking to the store. "You should be careful walking alone," he said in a low voice. "This neighborhood has rules, and not everyone follows them. You don't want to be on the wrong side." Maria looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for the warning," she said simply, then walked away without another word. Behind her calmness, though, Maria was beginning to notice a pattern. Clark's behavior wasn't just strict, it was controlling. He wanted people to feel small. He wanted them to believe he held authority. Maria kept her thoughts to herself, but in her heart, she knew one thing clearly: this man was no real officer. And soon, the truth would have to come out. The sunshine on Maple Street looked warm and gentle, but inside many homes, unease was quietly spreading. The neighbors had grown tired of Clark's constant watching, yet none of them dared to challenge him. His tall frame, serious face, and commanding voice made him appear untouchable. Children no longer played freely on the sidewalks when he was near. Parents whispered, "Don't make eye contact. Just do what he says." But Maria was different. She noticed every detail: the way Clark moved, the timing of his visits, the words he chose to sound powerful. To others, he looked like an officer. To her, he looked like a man trying too hard to play a role. One afternoon, Daniel returned from work later than usual. He looked frustrated, his tie loose around his neck. "You won't believe this," he said, dropping his briefcase near the couch. "Clark stopped me on my way home. He told me my car tires looked too worn out and that I should replace them immediately or risk a fine." "A fine, Maria? Who does he think he is?" Maria poured him a glass of water and set it on the table. "And what did you say?" she asked gently. "I told him to mind his business. But then he leaned in close and said, 'This neighborhood has rules, and I enforce them.'" Daniel shook his head. "Maria, I'm starting to think he's pretending to be something more than just an HOA officer." Maria's eyes softened. She touched his hand. "You're right. He is pretending. But we need to be smart. Anger won't solve this." Later that evening, they went for a walk around the block. As they passed other houses, Maria noticed curtains moving slightly, neighbors peeking out, watching Clark, but quickly hiding again. Fear had settled over the whole street. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about control. The next day, when Daniel went to work, Clark appeared again at Maria's door. This time, his approach was slower, more deliberate. He stood straighter, as though trying to make his presence larger. "You've been leaving your porch light on again," he said in a steady tone. "I warned you already. Do you think the rules don't apply to you?" Maria looked him in the eyes. Her calmness made his words sound smaller. "The rules apply to everyone," she replied. "But real rules are written down and agreed upon. Where are these written rules, Mr. Clark?" For the first time, he hesitated. He glanced down at his clipboard, flipping pages quickly. "They exist," he muttered. "I have them right here." "Then may I see them?" Maria asked. Clark's face tightened. He snapped his clipboard shut. "That's not how it works. You just need to obey." Then he turned sharply and walked away, his steps louder than necessary. Maria stood silently, watching him go. Inside, she felt a shift. This wasn't just about her family anymore. The whole neighborhood was under his shadow. And if no one stood up to him, his power would only grow stronger. That evening, she shared the moment with Daniel. "He couldn't show me the rules," she explained. "He is using fear, not truth." Daniel sighed. "Then why doesn't anyone else see it?" "They see it," Maria said softly. "But they're afraid to admit it. Fear can blind people more than darkness." A few days later, Maria decided to walk to the small grocery store down the street. As she passed by the park, she saw Clark again, standing near the benches, speaking to two neighbors. His voice was sharp, his arms crossed. The neighbors looked uncomfortable, nodding quickly as if to escape his presence. When Clark noticed Maria, his gaze lingered. He gave a stiff nod, almost a challenge, then returned to speaking with the others. Maria walked on, but she could feel his eyes on her back. That night, Daniel could sense something on Maria's mind. "You're thinking again," he said as they sat on the porch. "What is it?" Maria smiled faintly. "I'm watching patterns. He repeats the same behavior. He chooses times when people are alone. He doesn't confront groups, only individuals. That's how he keeps control." Daniel looked at her, puzzled. "How do you notice all this?" Maria met his eyes, her expression unreadable. "Because I've learned to observe. When you understand behavior, you understand power. Her words left Daniel thoughtful. He didn't press further, but a quiet curiosity stirred in his heart. Who exactly was his wife beyond the calm woman sitting beside him? The following week, something happened that unsettled the entire street. Clark posted a notice on the community board near the mailboxes. It read, "New neighborhood policy, all outdoor activity must end by 8 p.m. Failure to comply will result in fines." Neighbors gathered around, reading in disbelief. "He can't decide this," one man whispered. "Where did this come from?" another asked. Yet no one tore the notice down. Everyone walked away quietly, shaking their heads but obeying. Daniel clenched his fists when he saw it. This is too much. He's making up laws now. Maria placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Wait. His own actions will reveal him. People will see the truth when it becomes too heavy to ignore. That night, as Maria looked out from the porch, she could sense change in the air. Clark's control was reaching its peak, but every step he took brought him closer to revealing himself. And though Maria had not spoken of it, deep inside she knew her hidden strength, her past that no one in this neighborhood knew about, might soon be needed. For now, she chose silence. But silence was not weakness. It was waiting. The notice Clark had posted on the community board changed the atmosphere of Maple Street. Neighbors, once friendly and cheerful, began to retreat indoors earlier than usual. By 7 in the evening, the sidewalks were empty, and children's laughter no longer echoed through the park. It was as if the neighborhood itself had gone silent, obeying the command of one man who held no real authority. Daniel grew restless. He could barely contain his anger. "Maria, this is ridiculous," he said one evening as he closed the curtains. "People shouldn't be living like this. We didn't buy this house to be controlled." Maria, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, looked at him with her steady eyes. "I know. But when fear builds up, people stop fighting. They follow the voice that sounds the loudest, even when it's false." Daniel sat down heavily. "Then who will stop him?" "No one dares to say a word." Maria's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Sometimes, all it takes is one person to remind others that they are not powerless." The next morning, while Daniel was at work, Maria was pruning flowers in the front yard. She felt the warmth of the sun on her shoulders when she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Clark approached, clipboard in hand, his sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Rivera," he said stiffly. "I noticed your husband drove out before 8 today. That's fine. But your trash bins were visible from the street. That's against the new policy." Maria straightened slowly and met his gaze. "I don't remember agreeing to any new policy, Mr. Clark." "Who decided it?" "I did," he answered firmly. "I enforce the rules here. If you ignore them, there will be penalties." Maria tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but clear. "Rules are agreed upon by communities, not created by one person. If you cannot show proof of these rules, then they are not real." Clark shifted uncomfortably. "I don't need to show proof. People know I'm in charge." Maria smiled faintly. "People only believe what they fear. That does not make it true." Her words lingered in the air like a quiet challenge. For a moment, Clark's confidence faltered. He quickly turned, muttering under his breath, and walked away. Later that day, Maria noticed something unusual. Two neighbors, Mrs. Green and Mr. Lopez, approached her as she watered the plants. They spoke in low voices, glancing nervously around. "Mrs. Rivera," Mrs. Green whispered, We saw how you spoke to Clark. You didn't look afraid. How do you do it? Maria looked at them kindly. Because I know he has no real power. Fear only works when you believe it. Mr. Lopez sighed. He told me last week that if I didn't repaint my fence, he would fine me. I almost paid him money, but then I wondered, who is he really? Maria nodded slowly. That is the question you should all be asking. Who is he really? Her calm strength gave the neighbors something they hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. That evening, Daniel returned from work to find Maria deep in thought. What happened? He asked gently. She looked up. Some neighbors are beginning to question him. They see through his act. But Clark won't like that. He will try harder now. Daniel frowned. Try harder how? Maria sipped her tea before answering. By pushing further. By showing bigger threats. He needs fear to survive. And when fear starts to fade, he will grow louder. Her prediction came true the very next evening. As the sun set and the street grew quiet, Maria stepped outside to lock the gate. Clark was there, standing near the sidewalk, waiting. His voice was sharper this time. You need to understand, he said firmly, this neighborhood works under my authority. I won't have people questioning me. If you keep challenging me, there will be serious consequences. Maria looked at him, calm as ever. I do not challenge you, Mr. Clark. I only ask for truth. If you cannot show truth, then you cannot hold authority. Her steady tone unsettled him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you're clever. But one day, you'll regret not listening. Maria didn't move back. She stood tall, her presence stronger than words. I regret nothing, she said softly. I live by peace, not fear. The silence stretched between them. For the first time, Clark's voice trembled slightly. You don't know who I am. Maria's eyes were steady. And perhaps you don't know who I am either. The words slipped out before she realized. She hadn't meant to reveal anything, but in that moment, Clark froze. He stared at her as if trying to figure out what she meant. But Maria only turned and walked back into her home, leaving him unsettled. Inside, Daniel noticed her quiet mood. He came again, didn't he? He asked. Yes, Maria admitted. And now he is beginning to feel threatened. That makes him unpredictable. Daniel's worry grew. Maria, what if he does something worse? She touched his hand gently. Then we will face it. But not with anger. With truth. That night, as she lay in bed, Maria stared at the ceiling. She knew her secret could not stay hidden forever. She had spent years living quietly, never revealing her past. But now, her calm strength was raising questions. The neighborhood needed someone to show them the truth. Perhaps it was time for her to step into the light, not as just Maria the neighbor, but as the woman she truly was: disciplined, trained, and unafraid. For now, she remained silent. But in her heart, she knew, the turning point was coming. The night after Maria's quiet but firm exchange with Clark felt heavier than usual. The air in their home carried Daniel's worry, though Maria seemed calm. Daniel lay awake longer than he wanted, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't understand how his wife could stand face to face with a man who intimidated the whole neighborhood and still remain completely steady. Finally, unable to hold back his thoughts, Daniel whispered, Maria, how do you do it? How can you stay calm when everyone else is scared of him? Maria turned her head slowly to look at him. In the soft glow of the night lamp, Her eyes seemed thoughtful, almost distant. "Because I have lived through things far scarier than him," she said quietly. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Maria hesitated. For years, she had kept this part of her life locked away. Not because she didn't trust Daniel, she trusted him more than anyone, but because she wanted a life of peace, far away from the past she carried. Yet now, with Clark's shadow spreading over the community, she realized it might be time to share the truth. She sat up slowly, leaning against the headboard. "Daniel, there is something you never knew about me. Before we met, before I moved into the quiet life we built together, I was not just an ordinary woman." Daniel sat up too, his heart beating faster. Maria took a slow breath. "I was part of a unit, a team known as Delta Force. It was my life for many years. I trained, I served, I traveled to places most people never hear about. And even today, though I live here with you, I am still part of it, still active, though quietly. My role now is different, but I am not free from that world." Daniel stared at her, stunned. "Delta Force? You mean, Special Forces?" Maria nodded gently. "Yes." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Memories flashed in his mind every time Maria had shown strange strength, unusual calm, her habit of observing every detail, the way she never panicked in any situation. Suddenly, it all made sense. "Maria, all this time, I never knew," he whispered. She reached out and touched his hand. "I wanted to protect you from it. I wanted us to have a normal life. You gave me something I had never known before: peace, love, a home. That is why I never told you. But now, Clark's behavior is forcing me to use my training again, even though I wished to keep it hidden." Daniel shook his head slowly, still trying to process. "So that's why you're never afraid. That's why you always know what to do." Maria gave a small smile. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It's knowing fear but choosing calmness anyway. That's what my training taught me. That's what my heart tells me." Daniel's chest swelled with both pride and worry. He had always admired his wife, but now, hearing the truth, he realized she carried far more strength than he had ever imagined. "But Maria," he said carefully, "does this mean Clark is in danger? Or we are?" Maria shook her head. "No. He is only a man pretending to have power. But what he doesn't realize is that truth always comes out. My concern is not about us, it is about our neighbors. They are living in fear because no one has shown them that his authority is false. That must change." Daniel's eyes softened. "And you think you should be the one to change it?" Maria held his gaze. "Sometimes life places you in situations for a reason. Maybe I was meant to be here, in this neighborhood, at this moment, to help these people see the truth." Daniel sat quietly, absorbing her words. At last, he nodded slowly. "Then I will stand with you. Even if I don't have your training, I will support you in every way." Her smile widened slightly. "That's all I need." The next day, Maria began to prepare, not with weapons or threats, but with quiet strategy. She started talking to neighbors one by one, not about Clark directly, but about truth and community. She encouraged them to ask questions, to look closely at the notices he posted, to wonder why no real signatures or documents were ever attached. At first, the neighbors were hesitant. Fear still held them tightly. But Maria's calm presence gave them courage. "If she isn't afraid," whispered Mrs. Green to her husband, "maybe we don't need to be either." Daniel noticed the change too. More and more people began to look at Clark differently. They didn't openly challenge him yet, but their eyes no longer carried the same blind obedience. That evening, Maria told Daniel, he will notice the shift soon. He will see that his control is slipping. And when he does, he will push harder. Daniel felt nervous, but Maria placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Remember, this fear is loud, but truth is steady. We will not break. For the first time, Daniel truly saw his wife for who she was, not just Maria, his loving partner, but Maria, the woman who carried a strength shaped by years of discipline, and the heart to use it for good. And though the days ahead promised challenges, Daniel felt something new in his chest, pride mixed with hope. The woman he loved was not just his wife, she was the quiet force the neighborhood needed. The morning after Maria revealed her secret to Daniel, the neighborhood seemed different to him. He had walked the same sidewalks many times before, but now he noticed the silence more sharply, the closed curtains, the cautious faces. He realized that for weeks, everyone had been living under a shadow that only one man had created. Maria, however, carried herself as calmly as ever. She began her day as usual, watering the plants, greeting the mail carrier, smiling at children riding their bikes. But behind her peaceful appearance, she was watching carefully, noticing details that others ignored. At noon, Mrs. Green knocked on their door. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a folded paper. "Maria," she whispered, "Clark gave this to me. He says I must pay $200 because my mailbox paint is fading. But, the letter isn't signed by anyone official. It just has his handwriting." Maria unfolded the paper. She scanned the words, neat but uneven, with no letterhead, no proof. She nodded gently. "This is not a real document," she said softly. "Don't pay him. And keep this safe. It may be useful later." Mrs. Green looked relieved. "You're the only one brave enough to say that. Everyone else just pays because they don't want trouble." Maria gave her a reassuring smile. "Truth is stronger than threats. Keep trusting that." Over the next few days, more neighbors quietly came to Maria with similar papers, violation notices demanding money for small things, lawn too long, porch light too bright, children playing too loudly. Each time, Maria looked at the letters and confirmed the same thing. "None of these are real," she told them. "He has no authority to demand money." Word began to spread quietly among the houses. "Maria says the papers aren't real," whispered one neighbor to another. "She says he has no power." For the first time, people began to hope. Daniel watched all this with pride and worry mixed together. "You're turning into the leader of this neighborhood," he said one evening. Maria shook her head. "Not a leader. Just a reminder. They already have strength, they only forgot it." But as Maria had predicted, Clark noticed the change. He began to sense that his control was slipping. His visits became more frequent, his tone harsher. One afternoon, he stood in front of Maria's house, clipboard clutched tightly, his voice sharp. "People are ignoring my notices because of you," he accused. "You think you can turn this neighborhood against me?" Maria stepped out calmly onto the porch. "I do not turn anyone. They see with their own eyes. They ask for truth. And you cannot show it?" Clark's face darkened. For the first time, his voice wavered. "I have been keeping order here. Without me, this place would fall apart." Maria's expression remained steady. "Order built on fear is not order. It is silence. Real order comes from trust." Clark clenched his jaw, then turned abruptly and walked away. But Maria knew he would not stop. She knew the more truth spread, the more desperate he would become. That evening, Maria sat at the table with Daniel. Spread before them were the fake notices collected from neighbors. She studied the handwriting, the dates, the made-up rules. "This is the proof," she said softly. "These papers show he is not official. He is only pretending." Daniel leaned forward. "So what do we do with them?" Maria looked at him with quiet determination. "We show the neighbors together. We give them confidence to stand up, not alone, but side by side. Fear breaks when people unite." The next day, Maria visited a few trusted neighbors, Mr. Lopez, Mrs. Green, and the Thompsons. She invited them to her porch in the evening. When they gathered, she laid the papers out for all to see. "Look carefully," she said. "No official stamps, no signatures, no letterhead. Just words written by one man. These are not rules. These are not laws. They are only pieces of paper meant to scare you." The neighbors exchanged looks. Mr. Lopez frowned deeply. So, all this time, he had no power at all. Maria shook her head gently. "None. The power was only what you gave him by believing." Mrs. Green's voice trembled. "We let him scare us for nothing." Maria placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do not blame yourselves. Fear is powerful. But now you know. And once you know truth, fear loses its hold." For the first time in weeks, the neighbors smiled faintly. There was still nervousness in their eyes, but also a spark of courage. That night, Daniel whispered to Maria, "You're changing them. I can see it." Maria nodded. "It is not me. It is the truth. Truth always brings light." Still, she knew Clark would notice soon that his papers, his rules, his threats were no longer working. And when he did, he would try one last time to make people afraid. But now, Maria was ready. And slowly, the neighbors were ready too. The quiet force she carried within her was no longer only her secret. It was becoming the strength of the whole community. And though Clark didn't realize it yet, the wall of fear he had built was beginning to crack. The sun was setting when Maria stood quietly on her porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The neighborhood seemed calmer than it had in weeks. Children were playing outside again, neighbors were talking over fences, and laughter was beginning to return. Yet Maria knew the shadow of fear had not completely vanished. Clark was still around, and he would not accept defeat easily. That evening, Clark appeared again. He walked down the street with his clipboard, moving with stiff shoulders, his eyes darting toward each house. He stopped in front of Maria's home and raised his voice so everyone nearby could hear. "This community is falling apart because of lies," he shouted. "I have authority here, and anyone who refuses to listen will face consequences." A few neighbors peeked from behind curtains, but this time, they didn't hide completely. They stayed to watch. Maria stepped forward calmly, her voice steady but gentle. "Show us, then," she said. "If you have authority, prove it. Where is your badge? Where are the official documents? Where are the signatures from the city?" Clark froze. His face turned red, but he forced a laugh. "I don't need to show you anything. You should respect me without question." Maria looked around at the gathered neighbors. "Do you hear that? He asks for respect without proof. But true respect is earned, not demanded." Mr. Lopez, who had always been quiet, suddenly stepped out of his house holding one of the fake notices. His voice shook, but he spoke clearly. I paid him money for this paper. He said it was a fine. But Maria showed me it was false. Mrs. Green came next. She held up her own letter. He told me I must pay for my mailbox. But this is only his handwriting. Nothing official. One by one, more neighbors stepped forward, holding their papers. Some had been angry, others embarrassed, but all of them found courage together. Soon a small crowd stood around Maria, facing Clark. Clark's hands trembled. He tried to wave them off. These are rules. You people don't understand order. Without me, this place would be chaos. But now the people were no longer silent. No more, someone said firmly. We're not afraid of you anymore. Clark looked around, realizing the tide had turned. For the first time, his voice faltered. You'll regret this. He stepped back, clutching his clipboard like a shield. But instead of following him with fear, the neighbors stood tall, united in truth. Daniel stepped forward and placed his hand gently on Maria's shoulder. He whispered, "You've done it. Look at them, they're not afraid anymore." Maria nodded softly. They remembered their own strength. That is enough. Within days, the neighborhood formally reported Clark to the local authorities. When officials arrived, it became clear that he had no legal power at all. He was just a man who enjoyed pretending to be in charge, feeding off fear. With the truth exposed, he could no longer remain in the neighborhood. After he left, life began to blossom again. The children filled the park with laughter, families sat on their porches in the evening, and neighbors who had once stayed behind locked doors now shared meals together. One Saturday afternoon, the community gathered for a small celebration. They brought food, music, and flowers, filling the street with color and joy. Mr. Lopez raised his glass and said, "For weeks, we lived in fear. But now we stand free thanks to Maria, who reminded us of the truth." The neighbors cheered, but Maria only smiled humbly. "I did not do it alone," she said. "Courage grows when people stand together. That is what makes a community." Daniel looked at her with quiet pride. Later that evening, as they walked home under the gentle glow of streetlights, he said, "You could have told everyone about your training, about who you are. But you never did." "Why?" Maria smiled. "Because it was never about me being dealt a force. My strength is not just in training. It is in staying calm, in seeing clearly, and in helping others believe in themselves. They didn't need a soldier, they needed a reminder of their own power." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. He realized that Maria's true greatness was not in what she could do, but in who she was, a woman who chose peace over fear, who used truth instead of force, who carried her strength quietly and gently. From that day forward, the neighborhood saw Maria not as a hero who fought, but as a guide who healed. People trusted her wisdom, and the community grew closer, kinder, and stronger. And though Clark's shadow was gone, the light that Maria had helped spark continued to shine, not only in her home, but in every house around them. For Daniel, the lesson was clear: real strength does not always show itself in battles or titles. Sometimes, it is found in the quiet courage of a heart that chooses love, truth, and unity above all else. And for Maria, the journey was simple. She had protected her family, her neighbors, and their peace. That was all she had ever wanted. As the stars lit up the night sky, Maria whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, "Fear can break a community. But truth can rebuild it." And with that, the neighborhood finally rested not in silence, but in harmony.